So let's bring Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, Phillies Insider. He joins us now, host of the Powder Blue podcast. You guys will talk more about this tonight, but Frank, I think that's where we are right now. Is that how you feel? Do you see any way the two sides put their differences aside, come to an agreement, or are we at the point where we're just waiting for the commissioner now to kind of step in and fix this thing?
Well, I don't think that the Baseball Players Association is going to move off of their original agreement in March, which was to play for a prorated salary dependent upon number of games. I just don't see them going past that. And kind of the last resort is for Major League Baseball to just play a small number of games so that the amount of money spent on those salaries is not going to at least as they present it, totally bankrupt them, although I don't think anybody's in danger of going bankrupt. But I think that that's sort of the back end of this, that no matter what, baseball will be played. But if it goes that long, I think that will create some resentment for years to come. And I really hope that doesn't come to that.
You know, at this point, it sounds like they have moved no further than they were about a month ago, right? I mean, have the negotiations moved in any better of a direction?
You know, I don't really think so. I think that the Players Association made it very clear from the beginning that they still plan to stick by their agreement to play for that prorated amount, and they even wanted more games than Major League Baseball was willing to offer. And the most recent proposal, which is a 76-game season that's paid out at 75%, provided there is a playoff, that still doesn't sound that appealing. I think what's ultimately going to happen is if they're going to settle for that number of games, they better pay them in that full prorated amount. And maybe it's inching towards that. I don't know, but I think that the Players Association is just too worried about losing something permanently for the future, which is, again, trying to tie their salaries to the revenues.
Do you think that this is all about principle at this point, more so than it is the fight over money?
Yeah, yes and no. You know, I've kind of said before that even if baseball ends up deferring a lot of money to make this work, they're going to have to pay it back eventually, and it's really a matter of this. You know, Cardinals executive Bill DeWitt just came out and basically said, "Well, baseball isn't profitable." Well, I think what he's meaning is that at the end of the year, often your balance sheet shows that you didn't really make any money. But as we've said frequently, that year to year, these franchises increase in value. So it all depends on why you're in the business. I mean, I think that there's only 30 ownership groups out there for major league teams, and a lot of people would love to be part of that. And it's just a matter of how you decide to do business. And I think that the fact that the players recognize that there are annual increases of value every single year that the game is played, maybe not this year if they don't play it, that there's increased value for these owners every single time. And I don't think the players really want to just say, okay, well, your balance sheet is not even for 2020, so you must have lost money, because in reality they made money if their franchise increases in value.
How much of this is all predicated? The other sports played part of their season, Frank. We were discussing this before you jumped on. Basketball's already played 65, 70 games. Same with hockey. Baseball never got their season off the ground. How much of this is because they were simply unable to start the season because of the COVID-19?
Yeah, it's really kind of hard to start. I mean, at least with the NBA and the NHL, they kind of understand that they lost time, and it's going to be time to go to the playoffs almost in the case of the NHL immediately, or NBA almost immediately. Here they got to get it off the ground, and aside from that fronted payment of $170 million that baseball gave to their players to just help them get through these months, these players need to earn their salaries, and I think that's in a way that's kind of advantage owners if you're making it about a battle, because these people need to earn their living. And again, I've said this before. You think of well, they're multimillionaires, they all don't need to work. Well, you still have a lot of little guys that are fighting to maybe make their 1 or 2 years on a major league roster and they have to earn a good chunk of their entire life's earnings over these couple of years. So there's a lot at stake for a lot of these players, and it certainly would benefit them to get going. But the leagues that were playing, at least, they got most of their, I would say most, but they got a good amount of their money already. They might, the ones that were on the rosters in the leagues, there's not that same sense of urgency because they've been paid, and they can look towards the playoffs where, again, that's where a lot of them will share in the revenue. So it definitely is different coming from a point where they haven't really gotten going.
Do you think that this is a loud minority fighting back and forth, or do you think a lot of people involved are actually unhappy about it?
Good question. I mean, I think for the players, there's more little guys than there are big guys. You hear the superstars like Mike Trout just only really express their legitimate concerns about health, or players that maybe have earned some money. That's their biggest worry. But I do think that there are enough little guys that are, again, just trying to start their career and trying to earn like their one shot to earn a living playing baseball before they turn to other careers and start all over, which a lot of them actually do. So I don't know if it's a minority, but I think that the way that the union looks at it is they want to make sure they don't set any precedents that will hurt them down the line at the same time. And unfortunately, when that happens, sometimes the current players will get squeezed perhaps a little bit. I mean, the players that were a part of the 1994 strike, there were some that were at points in their careers where they didn't get to continue after that. I think that's fair to say. So, but when you consider the long range implications, I think that it's easier to get them on board in terms of the Players Association. And yeah, there's probably some outlier players that are just like, fine, I'll take the pay cut, let's go. But it's a pretty strong union. They have a pretty strong bargaining stance with that Players Association, and I think that it really is in a lot of their best interest to not lose that.
Okay, you just mentioned that if they concede stuff here, that will show, I don't understand what one negotiation has to do with the other. Like if the players concede something here, why is that showing the owners weakness, or that, hey, you got one over on us? Like, this is a very unusual circumstance. If both sides can't see that, then that's a bigger problem. Like, people keep saying that, well, the players don't want to concede, it'll show weakness. And I'm thinking, just because you give in on one negotiation doesn't mean you can't dig your heels in on another.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of weakness or how somebody looks. Baseball is one of the sports that they're not tied. Their contracts aren't tied to revenue, and I know they badly don't want that to happen going forward. So I think it's more about setting a precedent for later that they're willing to tie their contracts to revenue. The rest of the world, a contract's a contract, right? So I think they want to keep it that way. I mean, they don't want to be like the NFL where somebody could simply be cut and not paid. You don't want to have salary caps like you do in the NBA. And a lot of that was because of the bargaining position that they established. And one of the reasons why it's so strong is that baseball put together a lot of these things first before the other sports. So I don't know if it's just trying to look weak or anything like that, or just trying to one up the other. I think they really do want to keep that bargaining position that the other major sports just don't have.
All right. Obviously, there was some hope and some thought that July 4th might be this kickoff of baseball returning. At this stage of the game, do you see baseball happening anytime within the next month or so?
It would have to happen soon. I know last week when we talked, I was thinking that by next week when we talk on Tuesday that they would have to have something. But they are really kind of running out of time, unless, again, that there's this default that they can default to, which is just to have a season that's 40 to 50 games, and they're paid at their prorated amount that they agreed to. And really, if they were going to do that, if the season's supposed to end at the end of September, then they don't really need to start till mid-August, which is kind of crazy to think that you could have 6 weeks of games and that be the season. But So if they're going to really hold that hard line, and this could really go on another month before they have to do some sort of spring training, but hopefully it won't get that far. I mean, the one thing to take out of this last proposal is Major League Baseball did up the ante in terms of total dollars. And Jeff Passan, if you follow his Twitter handle, Jeff Passan of ESPN, he really did a good job breaking down the total revenues, and they are coming up from baseball side, but they're certainly not at the level yet that the Players Association wants. And 75% of the prorated salary isn't going to get it done right now. And again, one thing that proposal had was it's actually going to become 50% if there's no playoffs. So they're really banking on that playoff money to sort of finance these player contracts this year. And to me, I feel like they haven't done enough to talk about deferrals of player contracts. I mean, that's the one thing they haven't done yet. So who knows? Maybe by the end they can pay, if they pay 75% now and defer the rest over whatever agreed upon period of time. I think they can get this going, and hopefully by later the revenues will be up. As we were talking about a week ago, the players were willing to do some things to try to bring some extra revenue, and this new funky playoff system tournament thing that they were talking about will probably bring in a lot of revenue as well, although I really don't like that.
Do you think if the league does step in with the 50-game proposal that no one will care once it's on TV and everything will go back to normal? Or do you think people will be really upset with how this played out to the point where they're not going to watch?
I don't know that it'll be that bad. I think fans aren't. It will leave a bad taste in the fans' mouths, and I think more importantly, it will leave a bad taste in the players' mouths. You know that they kind of got the. I feel like they stuck it to them, and you know this CBA is almost up, and that can't be a good way to start negotiations for a new contract. So I got to think for that reason they just have to work this out somehow, and it's got to be within the next week or so. Now, according to the reports, baseball is supposed to respond to that proposal by tomorrow, and if I don't know how much more they're going to go back and forth. That's the difficult thing here. Like, I mean, kind of, there's no deadline, so it seems like it'll go on indefinitely until they do something. But they just have to do something because, like you said, you can't walk away from this with bad blood. I mean, people's lives have been disrupted enough as it is. You know, the average Joe been out of work, got furloughed. You know, a lot of us are just going back to our jobs right about now. Some people still haven't gone back. You know, we're trying to manage our pocketbooks based upon money we didn't earn, and try to, you know, people won't have the dollars to go to games like they normally would. But you know what? They can watch it on TV. That might make them feel a lot better about life. And so, you know, that's humanity, right? You know, times have been tough. People would just love to be able to watch baseball, and that's synonymous with summer for so many people. And
well,
if that doesn't happen, I'm just worried about what would happen.
And that's the problem, Frank. I think as this continues to go on and there's the opportunity to see basketball, hockey, football on the horizon, baseball has a chance to step out in front of them all, and they are blowing it big time. And I think it's going to be a big problem for them to get people to come back, especially if basketball continues to change. There's a lot of talk that basketball could start in December, play deeper into the summer, and when baseball has a couple of months where they're the only game in town, that might not be the case anymore.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. I mean, the NBA willing to play later now and then play later. That definitely is going to cut into that. And you know, I will say one thing about baseball franchises: they tend to be very territorial about their ability to broadcast games and not in competition with others. And you look down at Washington, D.C., when that franchise was started, Peter Angelos, who owns the Orioles, threw a fit. He didn't want to give up any of his TV audience. When the Oakland Athletics wanted to move to San Jose, San Francisco Giants didn't want to give up any of their media markets. So you would think that the owners would not want to be in that position, especially since we've seen this play out that way in terms of.
Sounds like we lost Frank. He just vanished into thin air right there. But good stuff from Frank. You'll hear more from him tonight during the Powder Blue podcast. And he, of course, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.